The 2017 Me Too movement in Washington, D.C., the largest in U.S. history, was the culmination of more than 100 years of work and turmoil by some remarkable women. This edition of World Press looks at the pioneers of women's rights and asks the question, just how have American women fared as we approach 2020, the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, granting women the right to vote? On January 21, 2017, one day after Donald Trump's inauguration, more than 4 million people marched in protests all over the world. Washington, D.C. saw approximately 200,000 protesters, Los Angeles some 750,000, and New York City about 400,000. The Women's March proved to be one of the largest in U.S. history. Today's World Press looks at this Women's March and those that preceded it, while focusing on the upcoming 100th anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment, which finally allowed women the right to vote. We'll turn first to World Press correspondent Andrea Rangno, who has been covering the aftermath of the 2017 Women's March. Andrea, just what was the impact of this march?
Dr. Fellow, the organizers of the Women's March saw an opportunity to do more than just make a statement. That first march merely served as a kickoff to a larger movement aimed at electing more women into office. Organizations such as Emily's List and Planned Parenthood used the march as an opportunity to build their email lists and subsequently planned workshops and fundraisers toward that goal. In October 2017, the founders of the Women's March launched a super PAC called March On, which they say develops and maintains the infrastructure necessary to ensure that the women who marched in 2017 and those who join their ranks every day can transform themselves into activists and organizers with the power to affect change. Simply put, the race was on to elect more women to office in the 2018 midterms. The results were impressive, with 36 new women winning seats in the U.S. House of Representatives, the largest number of women in the House in U.S. history. Among those elected was the first Muslim woman, the first Native American woman, and the first openly bisexual senator ever elected. It also saw the election of the youngest woman ever elected to Congress, the 29-year-old Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York. Dr. Fallow, while it can be difficult to draw a direct correlation between efforts like the march and electing more women into office, there is compelling evidence to suggest that the Women's March did affect the 2018 midterms.
Andrea, thank you for that report. World Press will continue after this announcement.
As Titans, we stand tall, showing the way as a leading CSU and a top public university in the West. Titans support community, providing spaces for coming together that add depth to the human experience. Titans celebrate opportunity, holding high our achievement in making education accessible with tuition well below the national average. Titans welcome challenge, responding to the state's evolving workforce needs and driving economic development. Titans embrace diversity, knowing that our differing backgrounds and perspectives strengthen our students. Titans pursue innovation, creating a university that is an emerging national model for empowering students on their way to a degree. Titans reach higher.
The 2017 Women's March was not the first of its kind in the United States. We now turn to World Press correspondent Samantha Rodriguez to give us some historical perspective to the present movement.
Thank you, Dr. Fellow. Women have been fighting for equality since the late 1800s. And in 1848, at the Westland Chapel, Seneca Falls, New York, a group of women met to discuss the current issues dealing with women's rights. Unbeknownst to these women in attendance, this meeting would mark what many believed to be the beginning of the women's suffrage movement. Led by Lucretta Mott and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, almost 300 supporters in attendance, including civil rights leader Frederick Douglass, a movement was created over the next 50 years. Women's suffrage supporters helped advance the cause under leadership, now including Susan B. Anthony. Women began to lobby Congress and circulate petitions to pass an amendment that would enfranchise women. The key to unlocking this historical change was the right to vote for women. One of the most vocal members was someone we seldom hear about, Inez Milholland, whose most famous public statement was, "President Wilson, how long must women wait for liberty?" Who was this major leading mover and shaker who is sometimes forgotten when we talk about the women's rights movement? Take a look at this.
If democracy means anything, it means the right to a voice in the government. Women are deeply concerned as men of the matters in our country. It's impossible for any problem that confronts the nation to be decided adequately or justly while half the people are excluded from its consideration. To believe that we have no part in determining national events, human events, is to believe women are not human beings. Inez Milholland. Inez Milholland, whom the New York Times called the poster girl of radicalism. Epitomizing the free-loving, free-thinking new woman of the early 1900s, she was not ashamed, for instance, for breaking up a campaign parade for President Taft, distracting the male onlookers by yelling "Votes for Women" through a megaphone from an upper-story window. After graduating from Vassar in 1909, she tried to get admitted to Yale University, Harvard University, and Cambridge University Law School. She was denied admission because of her gender. She was finally admitted to New York University School of Law and graduated in 1912. The roadblocks put in her way would only make her more determined to fight for women's suffrage. She stepped into her first parade on May 7, 1911. She was holding a sign that read, "Forward out of error, leave behind the night. The darkness forward into the light." She made her most celebrated appearance the day before Woodrow Wilson's 1913 inauguration. Some 500,000 people were watching 8,000 women marchers, which included representatives from Australia, Finland, and New Zealand, countries which already gave women the right to vote. As the parade continued, a group of drunken men disrupted the parade. They tripped dozens of women. Some 200 were injured. Milholland turned the white horse she was riding into the rampaging crowd and subdued them. It created much press attention and established Milholland as the icon of the women's movement. She believed women should have the right to vote because of the traits that were unique to women. Women, she said, would metaphorically become the house cleaners of the nation. She argued that women voters could remove social ills as sweatshops, tenements, prostitution, hunger, poverty, and child mortality. It bothered her that she was more popular because of her looks than her brains. During World War I, as she wrote anti-war articles that led to her censure by the Italian government, which eventually ousted her from the country, she had been barred from the front lines because she was a woman and returned to the United States feeling as if she was a failure. She found her calling once back in the United States when she set out on a tour of the West speaking for women's rights. As a member of the National Women's Party, she was suffering from pernicious anemia, but nothing would stop her. She traveled to 9 states in 50 days, speaking constantly. Quote, she said, "We are not putting our faith in any man or party, but in you, the women voters of the West. Let them know, President Wilson, how long must women wait for liberty?" She said in a speech in Los Angeles on October 22nd. She then collapsed in the middle of a speech in Los Angeles at Blanchard Hall. The Los Angeles Times put it this way: "In the middle of this intense sentence, this remarkable woman crumbled up like a wilting white rose and lay stark on the platform." End quote. She was taken to Good Samaritan Hospital. Despite repeated blood transfusions, she died on November 25th, 1916 at 30 years old. Her last public words were directed at President Wilson. "Mr. Wilson, how long must women wait for liberty?" Samantha, wasn't that a remarkable life for a woman who lived a short life?
Yeah, she definitely was a force to be reckoned with, and it's too bad she died so young. She definitely would have done some amazing things had she lived a longer life.
Thank you for your report, Samantha. World Press will return after this message.
Maybe he's really focused.
Hey, Michael. Michael. Maybe he likes spinning the wheels.
Maybe he just loves trucks.
Maybe he's just being a boy.
Preoccupation with objects is one early sign of autism. Learn the others today. The sooner it's diagnosed, the better.
In addition to celebrating the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, America also will be celebrating the 200th birthday of Susan B. Anthony. And when we talk about women's suffrage, we must talk about Susan B. Anthony. And joining us in the studio today is World Press correspondent Candace Rice, who's done a lot of work on Susan B. Anthony and some of her partners.
Yes, Dr. Fellow, it has been noted that Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony defined much of the 19th century women's movement. Their friendship and activism enhanced each other's skills so strongly, and their work prefigured much of the current women's movement. Their work paved the way for the 19th Amendment, giving the women the right to vote. Without them, there would likely have not been a historic 2017 march in major U.S. cities demanding that women become equal partners and take their place in American society and in U.S. Congress. More people are aware that along with activist Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Anthony founded the National Women's Suffrage Association in 1869. However, they may not know that around this time, the two created and produced The Revolution, a weekly publication that lobbied for women's rights. And later, the pair edited 3 volumes of History of Women's Suffrage together. Anthony grew up in a politically active family. For instance, they worked to end slavery in what was called the abolitionist movement. They were also part of the temperance movement, which wanted the production and sale of alcohol limited or stopped completely. Anthony took up the cause of women's rights while campaigning against alcohol. She was denied a chance to speak at a temperance convention because she was a woman. Anthony later realized that no one would take women in politics seriously unless they had the right to vote. Many don't know that she was so determined to get women to vote that she voted in the 1872 presidential election illegally. She was arrested and tried unsuccessfully to fight the charges. Dr. Fellow, she was fined $100, but she ended up not paying that fine.
Candace, you've done a lot of work on some of the partners of Susan B. Anthony, including Elizabeth Cady Stanton. And what have you found out about that relationship?
Anthony and Stanton became partners as women protesters gathered at various conventions. Stanton was one of the leaders in 1848 that organized the first women's rights convention called Seneca Falls Convention. Some 300 attended. The purpose was to gather women to make them aware of how poorly they were being treated and to have them sign a petition for their rights. Stanton helped write the Declaration of Sentiments, which is a document modeled after the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Sentiments gave examples of how men oppressed women and how they were treated as less than. Some examples are preventing them from owning land or earning wages, preventing them from voting, compelling them to submit to law created without their representation, giving men authority in divorce and child custody proceedings, and decisions preventing them from gaining a college education, preventing them from participating in public church affairs, subjecting them to a different moral code than men, and aiming to make them dependent and submissive to men. Stanton believed that the history of women having these submissive roles came from the Bible. She thought certain scriptures were interpreted to make it seem as if women were supposed to follow the man. For Stanton, the Bible was the greatest obstacle to the women's movement. In an effort to reappropriate a misused Bible for the empowerment of women, Stanton proposed the publication of a women's commentary on Scripture. Thus, she wrote the Women's Bible, which analyzes the passages that were meant to make women feel less than men, tell them what women were supposed to do, and how women are supposed to honor and be submissive to the man. In the Women's Bible, Stanton focused on the Old Testament's portrayal of women and how it used to constrain them. The purpose of the Women's Bible was to get women to see that they were being oppressed and controlled by these passages and to show the women and men that the passages could be interpreted in different ways. The true purpose of her book was to get women to join the women's suffrage movement. However, Stanton's Bible was not popular with many. They said she had become an embarrassment to the cause of women's rights. Her second book, 80 Years and More, was her apology. Yet she asked that women accept her views and understand them. She told them she envisioned a day when women would be free to realize their full potential. Obviously, women owe a great deal to the leadership and determination of Anthony and Stanton.
What a great in-depth look at both of these icons of the women's movement. World Press will return after this message.
If you love music, this is for everyone. It doesn't matter what major you are.
This is such a warm place to come get involved and to meet people.
If you want to do this, you should do it. You don't need any experience at all.
Our entire crew loves music, and this is the one place where they can just let go and be free.
What makes Titan Radio special is that this is the music taste of just students.
Titan Radio just gives you the freedom to basically just be who you are.
Every student should take advantage of this radio station. You'll gain valuable life lessons that you won't gain inside of the classroom. Our DJs and our volunteers actually move on from here and get outside jobs. They land their first internships, they nail their interviews because they have this on their resume.
I 100% recommend people to get involved. And the process for getting involved is as easy as going online and applying on our website.
Titan Radio is expressive, fun.
It's a party.
I love my job. I've probably learned more here at the station than I have my entire life.
Welcome back to World Press. We began today looking at the historic 2017 Women's March and its aftermath, the election of more women to Congress than any time in American history. What about in other fields like the entertainment industry? Joining me are World Press correspondents Veronica Ackworth, Crystal Martinez, Andrea Rangno, and Armando Vallapando. Okay, Veronica, have women really broke the glass ceiling when we look at the film industry?
Unfortunately, we have not broken through the glass ceiling when it comes to the entertainment industry. We have had plenty of women who have made large cracks in the glass ceiling, but statistics don't lie, and it shows that we do not have a lot of pull when it comes to the film industry. In fact, five major studios announced that they were doing 69 films this year, and only 13 will be directed by women. Additionally, there are very short numbers when it comes to statistics from 2017 and 1998. In 1998, there were only 17% of women working behind the scenes on the top 250 domestic grossing films. That number is now only 18% as shown in 2017, so we aren't moving a lot there. Additionally, in the music industry, only 21.7% of performers, 12.3% of songwriters, 2.1% of producers were women. So there's a huge gender disparity in the music industry as well.
And so we have a lot to do with women in particularly the film industry.
Yeah, we have a lot of progress to make. So we just need more women to be behind the scenes. We're seeing a lot of diversity on screen with films like Crazy Rich Asians and Black Panther, but we need to work on what's going on behind the camera as well.
And probably we need more women screenwriters.
That would be wonderful, because more opinions of women would make more women come to a movie theater, which means more money for the film industry overall. And once people see that these films are making money, then maybe we'll make more of them.
Okay, good. And it's good to hear what's going on with film and in the music industry. And Crystal, you've been working about women in the media, in particularly journalism. And what's going on there with in the present situation?
You know what? Women have been pioneers. The women pioneers of our past have really set the tone for the women pioneers of the future. You know, I took a look into Doris Burke, for example, who is an NBA sideline reporter, and she now is the first play-by-play commentator for the NBA. And I think it's groundbreaking for women, you know, to really step into the sports zone, which is very male-dominated. So I think it's really important that women are now making their mark in different types of things, and I think this is just the beginning. Just like Veronica mentioned, we need more women in these fields. So we definitely need more women to really step up and, be the path creators for the future.
It's interesting when we talk about women in journalism, it really was a profession that drew women from the colonial period, and there was no controversy with women in colonial America taking over for their husbands if they died or what have you. And then we come down to the Civil War period, where women had to really take over everything. They had to become doctors, they had to become lawyers, and they had to become journalists. And it's where the men really got aggravated when they saw a woman enter the newsroom, and they would scream, "They're stealing our pantaloons."
Right.
And then we had women who were very courageous. Barbara Walters, for one, to take over an evening newscast. And many people forgot that she wasn't well liked. The male on that show, the male co-anchor, didn't want her around at all, and she finally did leave. Until Oprah Winfrey comes on the scene, who's herself a journalist and a broadcaster, and really became the biggest star in broadcasting history, and has done a lot of good with that. And Andrea, you've been doing some work with women in other fields, and tell us about what you found.
Well, I've primarily been looking at women who are activists, who are organizing things like the Me Too movement, the Women's March, but there is a historical, context for that. Starting in the early 1900s with Alice Paul, she organized a march in front of the White House the day before Woodrow Wilson was inaugurated, the day before his inauguration, and she really put the pressure on him to support women's suffrage. And she was harassed for it. She was physically assaulted. She was committed to an insane asylum. She was thrown in jail for 7 months, but it worked. And she did get him to eventually voice his support for the women's suffrage movement, and that led to the 19th Amendment. So there is evidence that sort of protest, marches, activism on behalf of women makes a difference in terms of policy and laws.
And Armando, you also have some recent information on women in sports.
I do. So similarly to the realm of sports and the Me Too movement, as recently as last month, all 28 members of the women's soccer team filed a discriminatory lawsuit against the United States Soccer Federation. The women played just as many games, if not win more, and the pay is just not there. There's definitely pay disparity. They claim that it affects not only their paycheck, but also the medical treatment that they receive, where and how they train, and the coaching that they receive. So they've taken to social media, similarly to the Me Too movement, and I think that will continue in today's world. It's definitely a current way to get an important issue out there. So I can definitely see that as the new movement for a push towards equality of the sexes.
Very good. When we speak about the Women's March and we speak about equality, what's very interesting is the whole movement that started with the Me Too movement. Mm-hmm. And that has really taken off, and it has destroyed lives, which it should have. Some people have abused women. And how far do you think we're going to go with that, or the impact of that?
I think we're seeing a lot of companies looking at their policies regarding sexual harassment, and they're really forced to reckon with a lot of the fallout of Me Too. It's bad for their brand, it's bad for their bottom line, and I think that we're going to see companies taking women a lot more seriously when they complain about being harassed in the workplace or in their jobs in whatever field they're in.
And it's been really a positive thing, I think, from the 2017 March, this movement. What about 2020? You think we'll have a woman president? We have a lot of them running for the first time. And many people don't. People ought to realize that a lot of women have run for president of the United States before Hillary Clinton. And Margaret K. Smith is one of them, one of the earliest. But what do you think? Ready for a woman president?
I can see that. I think every generation has its pioneers. I think every single, they push it that much further. And I think that it's definitely maybe, 10, 15 years ago might have seemed like a dream, but as we've seen, we've had women run for president, and I can definitely see that happening in the near future.
I think we have a really qualified field of women. They have very impressive qualifications. We've never had so many qualified women running for the highest office in the land. So I think that's really a good place to start.
Good. Want to add anything else?
I think we're definitely ready for a woman president.
This has been a great discussion today about women and the women's movement, and starting with the impacts. Andrea reported about the impacts of this march, which has brought a new face to Congress, and certainly is pushing women to new heights, and that's a good thing for America, I believe. And I want to thank you for being here and for your contributions today. And I want to thank the viewing audience for being with us today. I'm Anthony Fellow of California State University Fullerton, and this has been World Press.